Hello and welcome, I'm Louise Perry. Today we have a very special show with the launch of the ADI World Alzheimer Report, highlighting the global impacts of dementia. This report is independently researched by King's College and supported by Bupa. And our guests today are Mark Wortman, Professor Martin Prince and Professor Graham Stokes. In this programme we'll be discussing the report with our experts and be putting your questions to our guests. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. Before we start, we have a short film from Kate Soifer, who is the co-chair of Dementia Alliance International.
My name is Kate Soifer, and I'm living beyond a diagnosis of younger onset dementia, received over 6 years ago at the age of 49. As a co-founder and current chair of the peak body globally for people with dementia, called Dementia Alliance International, an advocacy and support group whose membership is exclusive to people with dementia, we work to raise awareness about the lived experience of dementia and for issues such as our basic human rights to timely diagnosis, post-diagnostic support, rehabilitation, full inclusion and quality dementia care and support. People with dementia want to be participants in society to the extent that we are able to, and to have a purpose in life just like any other citizen. Organisations, communities and countries need to include us at every step of the way in their dementia-friendly initiatives, as it is only people with dementia who know what dementia-friendly means. It must not be about us without us. If people with dementia are not included in these initiatives, they cannot possibly be dementia-friendly. People with disabilities have shown the way, and like them, people with dementia want a relationship with others that is respectful and positive. The language of victimhood and suffering so often used in the community and media is unhelpful. Respectful, positive, enabling and empowering language is critical to becoming dementia-friendly. The findings of the 2015 World Alzheimer's Report show the urgent need for everyone to take action. Please join Alzheimer's Disease International and the members of Dementia Alliance International in helping create this change.
That was Kate Soifer giving positive feedback from someone living with dementia, highlighting the need to involve people living with dementia in response to this challenge. So, let's get on with the show. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Graham, Mark and Martin. A first question to all of you, really. What does the World Alzheimer Report 2015 tell us? Martin.
So I think the first thing is the numbers of people with dementia. So we now estimate 47 million people worldwide living with dementia. We've heard very moving words there spoken by Kate about the need to recognise the individual lived experience of every single one of those 47 million people. But at the same time, aggregated, that's an enormous number. Nearly 10 million newly diagnosed or new cases of dementia somewhere in the world every year, and a global societal economic cost of over $800 billion at present.
I mean, that is those figures and those numbers, and if it's continuing to rise.
We're looking at roughly a doubling in the numbers every 20 years. So the 47 million people living with dementia now will, we predict, be around 130 million people with dementia by 2050. It may be that that trajectory of growth may be changed, in particular by efforts to actually do more to prevent dementia, prevent the onset of dementia, where we think there's potentially quite a lot more that could be done.
And Mark, what about you? Tell us what you do, what your position is.
Yeah, well, these numbers show that this disease has a huge impact to our societies, not only to the people with the disease, but also their family carers and people in the workforce and also our health systems. So there is a really urgent need for action. And we're pleased with the action that was taken in the last few years by the G8 and now also by the World Health Organization. But it still needs to be implemented and brought into plans and programs. So there has been a lot of talking, good talking, but we need real action now in the next years.
And Professor Stokes, what about the carers? It's not just obviously the people living with the dementia, it's the carers that are looking after, the impact on them as well.
Yeah, the scale is huge, the cost is great, and a significant proportion of that cost falls on family carers who aren't paid. They're doing it because it's their parents, it's their partners, and we know that the stress, the strain, morbidity, premature death is present amongst family carers as well. So it's the numbers of people with dementia, but then you have to put into that equation all those who are affected by dementia, which will include those caring families.
And what about the cost implication? I mean, worldwide, with those kind of figures, I mean, I'm looking here, reaching $1 trillion by in 3 years, 3.5 years. I mean,
Just by
that's
2018.
phenomenal.
That's right. So the picture that we're looking at actually is one in which the costs of dementia care are actually rising more rapidly than the numbers of people with dementia. Costs inflate quickly.
Yeah.
And of course, there may be other factors in the future as well. We're all hoping that there may be, if not around the corner, at least relatively soon, new diagnostic technologies, potential new treatments for dementia that might even alter the course of the disease. At the moment, because so few people living with dementia actually have a diagnosis, healthcare costs actually only account for 20% of those $800 billion. The rest is actually social care, and yet social care at the moment is suboptimal because people are not receiving the advice, the support that they require. So even these basic services are not being provided in the way that they should be.
And why do you think there are not enough people with the diagnosis? Why are the people that are still, why does that happen?
I think it's a combination of factors. So awareness is too low.
Okay.
So far too often people think that the early signs of dementia are just a normal part of ageing. If they see anything abnormal, they wouldn't necessarily consider this to be a health issue or something that they should go and see a doctor about. Unfortunately, even in high-income countries, those views that dementia is a normal part of ageing and there may be little that can be done are shared by many health professionals, and so the problem of low awareness is not only one amongst the community as a whole. So that's the first thing that needs to change, is awareness needs to grow everywhere. If awareness is a problem in high-income countries, in low and middle-income countries it's probably even more of a problem, and the resources that are available through healthcare with trained professionals actually able to make an accurate diagnosis and begin to offer appropriate advice, support and care, again, that's an issue and a problem, and that needs to be addressed.
Mm.
And that's why the role of Alzheimer associations is very important, because they can speak on behalf of the families and the people with the disease, and also groups like Dementia Alliance International. They really need to speak out in their communities and advocate for change.
Now, obviously the report's been released today. What do you hope to achieve by addressing the kind of figures that we've just been talking about? And we've talked about it very briefly, but what do you hope to address, and what needs to change?
Well, I think inevitably it heightens awareness, which is obviously one of the things that Mark just mentioned.
Yeah.
You hope that there will be a government response, but who knows? These are challenging economic times. I believe what it means is we have to start thinking smart, not necessarily different, but maybe thinking in a smarter way. Because Martin's right, one of the reasons why diagnostic rates are so low is because there is no elegant medical breakthrough on the horizon. So we're talking about support and aftercare, and that's seen as an additional cost. And so for many people, because it's seen as unaffordable to care for somebody for a decade after diagnosis, the extent of their care plan is a discharge letter, which then takes you to the question you asked me, family carers.
Family carers doing the work, of course.
That's right.
Yep.
And when you appreciate that more than half of family carers are employed, they're out there, they're workers, they're juggling care for a parent, a partner, as well as their working lives.
Yeah, and a young family maybe.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what I hear from.
That's it, and that's where the stress and the strain starts to build up. And the number of family carers now devoting more than 50 hours a week to caring for a dependent person has doubled in the last 10 years. And so it's that burden of responsibility that we have to start addressing as well.
And what about you, Mark? What do you hope that we'll be able to address from seeing the report today?
Well, we put a section in the report with some recommendations, which we normally not do, but in this case, because the urgency is so big, what we ultimately think is that every country should make a plan. A few have done that, have made a national Alzheimer dementia strategy. And they need to implement it and evaluate and monitor, see how it goes and what can be improved. But there are some countries working on better diagnosis, better post-diagnostic support. And another big movement now in the dementia world is creating dementia-friendly communities. So how can society be inclusive? It can help people to continue their lives, even continue their work or their work as a carer. And it's not rocket science, it's just small measures, and it starts with awareness of the community.
The education of the community.
Yes,
it's always
is. Yeah.
that really basic stuff, I guess. But I would imagine to implement some of these things, from your point, takes time to get governments to implement care plans. And
yeah, it takes time, but it's not only governments.
Yeah.
It's society itself,
Yeah.
it's a local community, it's the business community that can play an important role. It's the academic community that can educate us and give us the evidence of what works. But we certainly need governments as well.
I think when Mark's talking about dementia-friendly societies, we've got to up our game. I still think that most people see dementia as a health and social care issue, when in fact that is only part of the response. Clearly, government funding of health services to improve those diagnosis rates is critical. We need to look after people at the advanced stages, so again that's in social care, but it's that space in the middle where we've got to give people a quality of life, and so when we talk about dementia-friendly, dementia inclusive communities, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
And you've got to support that, you've got to benchmark it, otherwise it just becomes a phrase that's tossed out there.
Yeah, and doesn't mean anything.
That's right.
Exactly. We've got loads of questions, as you can imagine, from viewers, so I'm going to start with those. So the first question is from Stephen Lott. What is the latest evidence on the risk factors for dementia? How can we, as health systems and as people, best prevent dementia? And that's from Martin.
Okay, so this was actually the topic of last year's World Alzheimer Report, modifiable risk factors for dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And we found, having sifted through all the evidence, that the strongest evidence was for raised blood pressure, was for diabetes, was for smoking, and on the other hand, a protective factor, which is more education in early life. So to the extent to which around the world, each generation is probably better educated than the last, this is a good thing, and one might potentially see falling rates of dementia and Alzheimer's disease in the future. The other factors link to cardiovascular health, and obviously in every society worldwide we should be trying to address these lifestyle factors to reduce risks of heart disease and stroke. And to the extent to which we succeed in doing that, then it's quite possible that the rates of dementia and Alzheimer's disease may change as well. The worry is that although cardiovascular health is improving in some ways in high-income countries, it's not improving in others because obesity is actually becoming more prevalent, diabetes is getting more prevalent, we're treating hypertension better, and people are giving up smoking. But in many low and middle income countries, those risk factors are moving in the wrong direction. Countries like India, China, many African countries, there's a smoking epidemic and an obesity epidemic which is on its way. So globally, we need to give much more attention to what health promotion might be for better brain health across the life course and reducing the incidence of dementia in late life. But it's a realistic possibility that we may at least be able to reduce the incidence in the future.
So I have another question. It's also for you, Martin. This is from Dr. Shibli Rahman. One is nationally struck about the prevalence trends in Africa and Asia from your new report. I wonder whether differences in general life expectancy around the world need to be discussed in your report, given your mention of the compression of cognitive morbidity.
Okay, excellent question. First of all, we used to think that the prevalence of dementia in low-income countries was much lower than in high-income countries. We no longer think that to be true. The more evidence that we have, the more studies and the better quality of those studies, we actually find that wherever you look in the world, the prevalence and to an extent the incidence actually looks rather similar. So we used to believe that perhaps there was a lower prevalence, possibly because survival into old age was that much less common in less developed countries. So it was a kind of survival of the fittest phenomenon, that only the fittest people made it into late life, and then they had a lower risk of dementia. So nowadays it's looking like that's not the case. The increase in our estimates of prevalence from China and from Africa, I should stress that those are not trends towards an increased prevalence over the last 5 years. It's just that we've got more data and better data, and we've revised our estimates. Yeah. We now think that nearly 60% of all people worldwide living with dementia live in low and middle income countries. And we've not emphasised that enough in the discussion that we've had so far today, because these countries have few resources and awareness is very low at the moment.
Okay, this one is another question for you. This is from Andrew Ketteringham, and this is for Graham. The number of people living with dementia by 2050 is shocking, but presumably this masks a much larger figure of the number who will develop dementia between now and 2050. Do we have an estimate of that figure?
I don't believe we do have an estimate, do we?
It's something like 600 million.
600 million?
It's an awful lot. I did actually add this up around the time of the launch of the G7 summit. It's rather tricky to come by, but Andrew Ketteringham is absolutely right that if one looks at the totality of people, and not just those individuals who will live with dementia, but obviously their families, their carers, those around them who will be impacted by this, it's everybody's business. Quite clearly, and people need to. This hopefully will serve a function in raising awareness throughout society of the importance of dementia. I mean, that will be one positive byproduct, perhaps, of what is otherwise a very worrying and concerning set of statistics.
Wow. So this one is also for you, Graham. This is from Kate Wallace. She said, I really worry that my boss has no comprehension of how stressful it is to care for my mother who has dementia. What can I do to get support?
Right. That's a very good question.
Really good question.
A very good question. I think you've got to enter the world of what is possible. So I've got a number of points here.
Okay.
Well, one of the issues with dementia, it carries great stigma.
Yeah.
And so it can be the case that you can be caring for a partner or a parent with dementia and you actually haven't sat down with, in this instance, your boss because of the stigma associated. You don't actually want to admit that it's even in your family. So I think that's one question that we do have to address going forward. How do we reduce the stigma that's associated with dementia? And I think it's there because it's wrapped up with archaic terms of senility. It's also wrapped up in mental illness and asylums of the past. That's one thing. I think the second thing is that you are hoping that by drip, drip, drip reports such as this, all people in society will become more aware, including employers as well as employees. So that's what you're hoping as well. I think on a local basis, there are Alzheimer's Society in the UK. Virtually every country has its own national association. You can go to them for advice and guidance. I mean, I tend to find that what people want is advice, permission to, it's okay to feel stressed. You're not going to be the perfect carer. Also think about yourself, because if you don't give yourself time, then you're not going to
look after anyone else.
Precisely. And they need to be navigated, supported to find out what is actually available. So nowadays you wouldn't like to think that a family carer is just out there abandoned and just caring in isolation. You would hope that there is some support being offered by health and social care, even though that support might not be great, but there may at the very least be advice and guidance. So I think it's sort of a combination of approaching this. Is your employer becoming more aware? Have you really shared what you're going through? And have you actually gone out there and actually sought some support from such organisations as Alzheimer's Society?
Okay, we've got one final question, and this is general to all of you. So this is from Danielle Grazia. We have known for a while that dementia prevalence is increasing and will continue to increase in the coming years. If we compared therapeutic options that we had 10 years ago with the ones that we have today, how much have we progressed in the fight against dementia? Good question. Mark?
I think there's quite a progress in the interventions, so treatments that are non-medical, that are looking at how can you still use your brain while you have dementia, because it's possible. There's some learning capabilities. And so there's research done. One of the things that comes to my mind is what is called cognitive stimulation therapy, which is a training in how to keep people with dementia active in their brain and that has been studied and compared to people who didn't do it and shown an impact. But there's rehabilitation therapy, there's things like musical therapy, using the arts. So there's quite a lot more, I think, than 10 years ago now, but it's not very well known.
Yeah.
So the research into the care and these kind of treatments is really underestimated compared to the biomedical research.
Okay. What about you, Graham?
Right, well, I agree with everything Mark has said. The question I think is very good, and it says if we compare therapeutic options.
Yeah.
For me, to enter therapy, to receive therapy, means that the other side, you feel better. You're better for the therapy.
Yeah.
So for me, it's therapeutic to know that the language is now about people with dementia. We heard Kate eloquently speak at the beginning. It wasn't that long ago that we thought there were no people. It was a terrible disease, it destroyed the person, left the body behind, it was just about symptoms. We know that is nonsense. These are people who are living with dementia. Respond to the person. You know, be kind, be gentle, be tolerant, be understanding, listen. Take one step back and just wonder what it might be like ourselves to live with a memory that's destroyed and difficulty getting your words out. And I think if you can do that, that's a therapeutic option. That will make the person feel better.
Yeah.
So I think it is about drug treatment research. I think it's about interventions that are, said to be therapies, but also I think it's about the way you relate to people with dementia.
It's about us, and that's not difficult to do.
No, it's not.
Just to listen and be kind.
That's right.
Finally, from you, Martin.
Well, to be slightly controversial on this,
Okay.
I think perhaps the biggest advance has been in terms of understanding what we shouldn't be doing,
Right.
as opposed to what we should. I think the single, perhaps most important advance has been in our understanding of the ineffectiveness of so-called antipsychotic drugs in controlling or diminishing behaviour disturbance or some of the symptoms that can sometimes occur, such as hallucinations, seeing things and hearing things. In many people with dementia, not only have these drugs been relatively ineffective in addressing these issues, but they've also been extremely harmful, with a lot of side effects leading to, for example, falls and fractures, and with a substantial increased mortality for older people that have been taking these drugs. So these drugs that were very widely prescribed, their prescription rate has now plummeted in countries like the UK and other high-income countries that have had this problem and have taken note of it. Apart from that, I would completely support Graham's view that I think the big advance has been towards a much more person-centred approach in the way in which care is structured, and I think that advanced directives are one example of that. So one of the most important things as far as a timely diagnosis is the opportunity that this gives for the person with dementia to think through and discuss with their families about how they would like their care to be structured and organised in the future, and that's an absolute core necessity if care is really going to be person-centred.
Martin, thank you very much. Mark, Graham. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today, but if you do want to find out some more information on the report, you can visit www.worldalzreport2015.org. So that's all that's left for me to say, is to thank the gentlemen that joined me in the studio today, and thank you so much for joining us. See you soon.